surprised nobody commented on that. I'm a little disappointed.
I thought it was funny. Okay, we're going to go live as soon as it's...
We are question and answers from the RV Repair Club. My name's David Solberg. I am the managing editor, and we have already got at least 11 questions that have come in earlier. Last week we did our gold event on refrigerators, and that was quite interesting. And with the summer coming along, a lot of people are going to be fighting the heat and trying to get those refrigerators to run more efficient. So that was kind of a fun little class that we did for gold members. So we got the questions. We'll get started with those right away. The first one we have is from Linda, and Linda has a 2002 Monaco Executive with a Thetford toilet. There is no seal on the bottom of the toilet, and it's leaked quite bad on the tile floor. The floor is rotting and the toilet will not bolt down. Help, how can I fix this myself? Usually what happens with a toilet like that, there's a flange. I took a picture here of one that we took a toilet out and upgraded to a taller porcelain toilet, and this happens to be it was a Sealand toilet, which would have been the Dometic brand. But one of the things you'll notice right here is this flange is what typically goes through the floor and into the top collar of your holding tank, of your black water tank, and then the bottom of the toilet, which you can see right here, is going to fit onto this. So this is actually screwed to the flooring section, and then the bolts are put into this kind of upside down, similar to you would have a residential toilet. If you've ever done one of those, you just slide it in that collar inside of it. My guess is that it's not the seal of the bottom of the toilet. Typically what happens with toilets and the rotten floors is that they don't get winterized, that the valve leaks, the freshwater valve that's going to come in and flush the toilet, and it's sometimes very difficult to see because that valve is encased in the pedal under the base of the unit, and so it just leaks on the floor, and it pretty much is going to rot that plywood floor out. This is a pretty challenging repair, DIY repair, because you're going to have to find the framing of that floor, the studs basically that are supporting that, and cut that old bad floor out where that's at. It's just like in your home. If you had a leak in your home and the floor rotted out, underneath that you would have to replace that 4x8 sheet of plywood, or not the whole thing, but at least find where those studs are and then center it to those studs to get some support. You have to do the same thing with this. That means cutting the linoleum out. In that case, you said tile in here, so you're going to have to probably take several pieces of that tile out and reapply that. But then you'll go right back in. So I would start by taking the toilet out and just seeing what's causing the damage. Maybe the subfloor is good. It's just your bolts have rusted out and broken, and you can put a new flange back in it. Like I say, that's just this piece right here going down into the inside of that. Most of them are fairly similar to that, but take that out and just see what kind of damage you've got there. Also check on what you have for that valve too, if that's leaking or not. But that's more the case than the bottom leaking of that unit. Okay, so then the next one we have Christina, excuse me. How do I troubleshoot a heater? And that's a fairly generic question because we need to know what it's doing, what's happening. So the first thing, I'm going to bring up a furnace out of here and just kind of go through the operation of it. This happens to be what the furnace case would look like. You would have elephant trunks or a plenum coming off the top to supply your heat, but you need to understand how a heater works to troubleshoot it. So I'm going to bring this up. Ooh. This would sit to your outside area here. You'd have a cover that's accessed from the back side of it, but this is your outside port. You're going to have fresh air coming in, exhaust air coming out. So the first thing that happens is when your thermostat calls for heat, and that's where I'd start with. Make sure your thermostat's good. If you got just a typical thermostat with just the heater, the two blue wires, you can take those apart, connect them, and see if it starts up with that. If you've got a heater with an air conditioner, then you'll have to get the wiring diagram and find out what are the two wires that are supplying the information down into your gas valve and opening all this stuff up. So once that thermostat kicks in and says, I need heat, creates a closed circuit, sends it down here, the first thing that happens is that your blower motor for your interior portion here starts up. And you can't see it, but inside this canister right here is what's called a sail switch. And it's just a small little piece of metal that's just hanging out there. And what it does is that when this blower motor kicks in, the first thing it's doing is it's trying to raise that sail switch to say, I do have enough power, I do have enough voltage, fan speed, airflow. It's going to then purge the chamber in here and exhaust out whatever gas or stale air that's in that system. So then once the sail switch gets to a certain height, it says, yep, I'm going fast enough. Then it's going to tell the gas valve to open. You'll hear it click, and then you'll hear a spark that's coming in. And on this model here, we've got, there it is. That would be on the top. Comes through, so in here is where go, and you could see a flame that's going in there. But again, this is all encased, so you wouldn't actually be able to see that inside your RV. So once that flame hits and it starts up, then it's telling the blower motor for the interior port to draw air from inside the coach. So none of the air coming in or out goes into the coach at all. It's all just internal, goes back out. So then you've got a cold air return that pulls air into it. And if I turn this around, you can see this fan in here then is the open fan that's going to push air across this heat chamber, and that's where you get your hot air. So it's going to push across. Now the other thing that's in here is this high limit switch right here on the outside edge. So if your unit starts up and only runs for a few minutes and then shuts down, more than likely what's happened is that high limit switch is saying, whoa, I'm getting way too hot and I need to shut down, something's wrong. Typically that's because people close vents or they put carpet rugs and stuff like that over vents inside. All those floor vents need to be open. All those elephant trunks need to be clear and free flowing. A lot of times people will shove stuff under the cabinets, under the sofas, and pinch those hoses. And if you don't get good airflow coming out of this, it's going to get hot in here, and that limit switch is going to pop it off. And so you got the very first thing, thermostat. Second thing is if that sail switch is not raising high enough, that's telling me I have less than 10.5 volts of battery power. I have to have house batteries, which is the 12 volt DC batteries, at least 10.5 volts to make this fan go fast enough to push that sail switch up. Another thing that could be happening if it starts for a couple minutes and then shuts down and you don't have any of your vents inside covered with rugs, it could be you have low LP pressure. Now typically you'd have to check that with a water column test. There is something that you can do manually basically to test your LP pressure. Go inside, turn on a stove vent, one of your stovetop vents. Light a second one. It'll come down just a little bit and then should level back up. Light a third one and watch what it does. They've got all three of them going and they got a pretty decent flame going. Start up an appliance, whether it's a refrigerator on LP, your heater. If this is what you're having a problem with, I definitely recommend firing up the heater. See what happens to that LP flame. If it goes way down and this starts up and then goes off and these stay down, then that's telling me my regulator does not have enough pressure to run more appliances. That's a good way to tell what your LP pressure is. So by understanding the system and how it works, to troubleshoot a furnace, you'll need to take a look at what components are happening. Is it not getting hot enough? Is it not staying on? Those are the things you have to identify, and by taking these steps, then you should be able to tell, okay, it's not starting, it's probably a sail switch. Then you're looking at pretty much pulling the unit out and bench testing it. There's not a lot you can do from that compartment There are a few units. This one happens to be one that was in a Winnebago that I can access from the back, and I can at least get at some of this stuff and the sail switch and ohm those out. But otherwise, you're talking about pulling a unit, and that's a pretty big deal. So, all right. And I just happen to have a furnace laying around. That was kind of nice. Thank goodness I don't have a refrigerator question. That'd be tough to get up. Okay, the third one is from John. I've tried everything to figure out why my dark water tank won't empty. I've tried snakes. I've tried the ice. We have a product to break it down so it will flow. I will ST of the last bit. Can't really understand that. The last bit we used a cheap brand. Okay, all right. So they must use a cheap brand. Can you help me out with other ways to get this thing flowing? Another breakdown product, some way to flush it. Would Rid-X be safe? I've become desperate. I don't know what to have to empty it every couple of days. Any help is greatly appreciated. First thing I would recommend is Thetford has a couple different products. I do like this tank blaster. It goes in and cleans tank walls and so forth. Super concentrated. You might be a little bit beyond just the ordinary cleaning products in here. A lot of times what happens is people leave the black water tank open and it starts to pyramid, meaning the water flows out right away, the liquid stuff, and then the solids stay and they just capacity out of it to replace. But you can use Rid-X. I would say take a look at some kind of a drain cleaner similar to something you would use in your home, because that plastic that is in that basin is the same kind of plastic used in your house. Don't let it set too long. You've got the valves down at the bottom that's going to start to deteriorate that rubber seal of that valve. But I do know some people that have used some Drano and some other industrial stuff that can clean it. One of the things you might want to try is the black water tank wand. And I'm not sure what type of unit you have in the configuration of the toilet to the black water tank, but they do make a wand that you can stick down the toilet, hook to a garden hose, and it'll give you pressurized water and kind of work that stuff up pretty well. I have known some people that have gone from the backside and opened up the black water tank valve and used a hand snake up through that way. And you don't want to use a mechanical one. You don't want to use the industrial style, but you do have some hand snakes. They're just a kind of a coil that goes up, and you dump your tanks first, let that all come through, and then number one thing in doing seminars is always shut the phone off, which we did not do. So we're just going to let that. I'm not going to answer. I just figure out how to get the volume down. There we go. They'll go away. That's all right. So anyway, make sure you dump the tank and don't have anything in there. Use one of those snakes. You definitely want to get as much protection, gloves, that kind of stuff. Have something underneath that you can catch it with, and just try to keep working it out. The ice, all that other stuff. Cheap brands of drain cleaner are not going to do it. So try those things, and you should. It might take several times to do it, but something is in there clogging it. Reed is there a rule of thumb for how often or how many miles towed should the wheel bearings be replaced, and on the MORryde suspension? How often should the spring shackle pivot pins be greased? So I'm assuming that you're talking about a trailer being towed from the backside, and every manufacturer has different recommendations. Some of them say once a year, some of them have the bearing buddies, all that kind of stuff. Typically what I do, and I have a side business. We have 3 trailers on the road, and we had a lot of problems with bearings. We were greasing them as much as we could. We used bearing buddies. They didn't seem to work at all. And what I do is I have the guys just use one of these. It's an IR temperature thermometer, which is infrared, and it will do heat So I simply take and you see where you can just hit something on the wall here. My do the and they record are at. And you know, kind of a general rule of thumb is that if it's 70 degrees outside, I can see 20, 130 degrees. That's telling me my bearings are starting to get hot and it's time to take them in and get them greased. Since we've been doing that, we have had no bearing failures out in the road. So to me, it's just best to see, you know, what's temperature, what's happening with those things. And then, you know, you can, we grease them every year, and now I don't think doing that, we grease them about every 2 years. So that's, I would use that. And Brian has, I know that keeping the black water tank open can result in pyramiding. We just talked about that a little bit before. So, excuse me, I do not do that when camping, but is there a downside to keeping the gray water tank open while hooked up? The downside of that is you're going to get the smell from the gray water tank system underneath, and they're both going to the same place. So you'll get that smell from the underground system coming up through. I would definitely let it sit in there. You know, also what's happening is sometimes your kitchen goes into the gray water, and you know you've got your shower that's going in there, so you got soapy water, and if it goes down, you can get soap scum that sits on the side. I think it's best just to leave that stuff in there to kind of gurgitate and put your gray water tank mixture in it, and then let it dump out. So, all right, we got Carol, and Carol says, when is it a good deal to buy a 10 to 12-year-old Class A diesel pusher? What kind of maintenance issues will I be facing in the future with it? There is no really good time, I guess, of the year to buy those. And like with any used vehicle, the main thing is you got to see how well it was maintained. Did they do the oil changes when they were supposed to? Did they maintain the tires, the batteries? You know, batteries are where you're going to have the biggest issue. Did they properly charge them with a multi-stage charger? Otherwise, they're going to be sulfated. How did they check the roof seals? You know, did they condition the roof once a year? Did they have any leaks? That's the number one thing I look at leaks. You know, I've seen 10 to 12-year-old units that look like they just came off the showroom, and I've seen some that look like they're 100 years old. They leave them outside in the sun and the fading. You know, the diesel, the average RVer puts 3,000 miles on, unless you're full-time or do the big trip to Alaska and stuff like that. But so you usually don't see a lot of miles. But checking the maintenance on them. One of the things I would recommend is check out the videos. We have several videos on purchasing used and the different aspects of it, from the roof to the sidewall. And the other thing I would do is I would have an RVIA certified master mechanic do an inspection of that unit. You'd never buy a home without a house inspection today, and people buying RVs just thinking everything is right. And yet we have the same issues with RV appliances and roofs and sealants and leaks and so forth. So, and the reason I say RVIA certified, they know what to look for as far as the leaks, the refrigerator gasket. Every 2 years you should check the torque on the springs of the 4 mounting bolts so the gasket is squished right or compressed right, and you don't have any leaks in it. So get somebody to check that out. Okay, and then Robert says, I have a Winnebago 24G View that I may have tried to start the hot water heater without water in it. How do I verify that the water heater has water, and is there a bypass? I may have forgotten. Thank you. So the water heater in that unit typically does have a bypass valve. Usually it's in the service center, and it'll just say water heater bypass. And what that's designed to do is it allows you, when you push that valve, you can dump the water out of the water heater, and then when you install RV antifreeze, it bypasses the water heater, so you don't have to put 6 or 10 gallons of RV antifreeze in the water heater when you go to winterize it. But that is an issue if you have an electric water heater, starting it up with no water in there. you could blow out the module board in it. So you definitely want to check out the unit, the valve, and the drain plug. That's the two ways you can tell, what's in that unit. If you can't find a valve anywhere, then what you're gonna have to do is let that water heater cool down, pull the plug, and see, do you have any water in that. And since it's a Winnebago, it's going to be one without the anode rod. I believe that's an Atwood version. So check for the valve. I would guess there is one in it. If you have a question too, it should be in your owner's manual, or you can give Winnebago a call in their owner relations department. They have an outstanding staff there that really knows their stuff. And so now we have Bruce, that I bought an RV that has been sitting for several years, and the fresh water usage has been very strong odor when used. How do I get rid of the smell? Coach is very nice and was owned by my sister. Okay. I like to use bleach. Some people use vinegar. There is a freshwater conditioner that Thetford makes as well. You can do that all depending on how strong that is. But if you use, typically you're going to see 30 to 50 gallons of freshwater tank that's available in those units. If you take 4 cups of bleach and you put into that system and fill that water tank up, drive it around a little bit, let it sit overnight, and then dump it. And I would also not just dump it, but run it through all your systems. Get it through your shower, your toilet, your freshwater system. That's what they use to shock a well, they call it. If you have a well that goes bad, they'll put bleach down the well and just let it sit for 24 hours and then run it through so it will dissipate. If you don't like the smell of bleach, you can try the vinegar or the Thetford product, but bleach works pretty well. Then, what do I have? Sam, my Thor Ace 2013 29.2 RV water pump puts out very low pressure. Also, when city water is used, my freshwater tank overflows. I checked filters, leaks, but cannot find any valve that would cause this. My 12-volt pump is new. Okay, well, your pump probably is something like this. This is a SureFlow pump that it's going to run, what do we got, 3 gallons per minute. So it's a pretty low volume pump compared to standards for residential. Residential is going to run somewhere in the probably 5 gallons per minute, maybe not quite that high. So a lot of people try to compare the two of them. On the front side of this pump, you're going to have a strainer or a filter. And keep in mind, you're running cold water through this, and it's generally hard water. Most of the campgrounds don't have soft water, unless you get out in the Rockies. That seems to be. My father-in-law lives in Longmont, and their water's all soft coming from the mountain areas. But anyway, you're going to have hard water, so you may have a strainer that is plugged on this side here. The other thing you could have is a crack. Listen to the water pump, and when you have it on, you're not using it. Does it cycle? Go prump. Anytime when you have that on. If that happens, then somewhere you've got an air leak coming into that. And since it's a new pump, it's probably on either in or out coming into it. So check the strainer first. Then you're going to just basically have to follow the lines. Now you may have a valve that is on the inlet side that diverts or shuts it off or pushes it down to the bottom. So make sure you don't have any leaks coming out from underneath the bottom of the unit. And then let me just check in here. It says I checked filters. I cannot find any valve. And then from there, I would just start pulling off faucet strainers and so forth, and just see if you're any of those are plugged. One of the things that I've done in the past is I've taken the supply line coming to the kitchen or to the faucet in the bathroom or the shower head, to take the supply line off and run this and just see, am I getting good pressure through that hose, through that piping? If not, then you probably start getting some calcium in those lines, and you might want to run a little CLR through it. All right, we have two more. Janet, we would like to know the best size, power, quietest brand generator to buy for our 2018 40-foot fifth wheel. It's already pre-wired generator, and we kept it in South Texas, so it gets hot during the summer. We have three 15,000 BTU ACs, and she goes on to name all the bells and whistles and toys in there, so that means she's got a lot of stuff. In my opinion, the best generator out in the market is Awning. There are others that are available. I know over the years that Winnebago's tried Kohlers and Generexes and that kind of stuff, but everybody's pretty much migrated back to the Awning product. It's very dependable, very quiet, and you're looking at getting up. And since it's a toy hauler, I believe she said we would like to know the size of the generator for a fifth wheel. It just says fifth wheel. So I guess the first thing I would ask is it a toy hauler or is it just a regular fifth wheel? If it's a toy hauler, you have the option of gas or propane. If it's just a fifth wheel, you really don't have a fuel source. Toy hauler is going to have a fuel tank in it, so you're limited to propane on the fifth wheel. And again, I would still stay at the Awning size of it, and you're going to be up into that 6,500 kW to be able to run 2 roof airs. I doubt you're going to be able to run 3 and all that stuff. So that'll give you a 50 amp power, just like you're going to plug your toy hauler, your fifth wheel into a shoreline power. So that's what I would recommend. Paul says the compressor is noisy when it runs. What can I do? And so with that, I guess the whole, what compressor are you talking about? The only compressor that I know of in the unit is in the roof air, and if that's the compressor that's running noisy, first thing I would check is my filters. If you've got filters that are plugged and you got a cold air return that's coming through, so it's very common to not look at those and not realize that does have a filter in it, and you're going to be getting dust and all kinds of stuff inside that unit. So if that filter is plugged, that compressor is going to start to really get noisy and draw air and vibrate and hum and have issues. So that's the first thing I would look at. Otherwise, there are no other compressors in there unless you're talking about a converter that's charging the batteries or other stuff like that. But I would take a look at your filters for the compressor. So that's the pre-questions we have, I believe. And so my lovely assistant, Angie, has some questions that came in while we're here.
Jim asked,
Hi, Jim.
AGM versus regular lead acid, normal life amp hour rating, charge cycle, 4 6s versus 212 volt. Recommendations?
Yeah, you kind of went through all the gamuts of the batteries that are available out there. Lead acid batteries are the standard batteries that have acid inside, like you would see golf cart batteries, and they've been in motorhomes for years and years and years. And those are going to have, I wouldn't say the disadvantage, but the challenge with lead acid batteries is they require more maintenance, proper charging, which AGMs do as well, but they're a little less. I like the line that my Trojan contact said that AGM batteries are the lazy man's battery. And what AGM is absorbed glass mat, and so it's completely sealed, and instead of having the ports that you have to put more water in and stuff, the AGMs are less maintenance, and they tend to last longer, meaning years last longer. They're not, batteries are sold in group amp hours. So if you get a group 24, you get 80 to 100 amp hours. If you get a group 27, you get 120 to 140, and you can go 31s and so forth. Whether you buy lead acid, whether you buy AGMs, glass mat, they're all going to have the same amp hour ratings. Now, where lead acid have gotten a bad rap is that most people don't charge them properly. So that means a multi-stage charger. That is a 16-volt charge to start, where it boils that battery up, because when you start to use and batteries are simply storage. That's all they are. Lead plates with acid. You put energy in, it stores it, and then you use it. And as that energy leaves, sulfur develops between the plates. And if you don't properly charge that and break that sulfur up, then it starts to stay in there, and the longer that happens, the more it blocks those plates and takes up the storage in there. So typically what you see is that a lead acid battery lasts 2 to 3 years. They should last 5 to 7. You know, they start with a 16 amp charge, boil that up, then it goes to a float and an equalizing charge. And unless you have an inverter with a multi-stage charger, your typical converter is just going to have a on-off charger. It senses 10.5 volts, I need to charge, it throws 13.6 volts at that battery until it hits 12.6, shuts it off. That is not going to break up the sulfation. Huge problem with batteries in the market. So the AGMs, you're going to spend a lot more money for them. If you do a lot of dry camping, and let me back up just one more step. And you don't have to buy the very expensive inverter to charge that. Progressive Dynamics has a converter that you can use that has a charge wizard that will do that. Conditioning is what it's called. You can also get a battery minder that'll extend the life of that lead acid battery by 200 cycles is what they're claiming. That's 2 to 3 years. And I've seen a lot of people put those on and love them and can't believe the kind of capacity that they have. So what happens with those lead acid batteries is, you know, they start off and then in 6 months or 8 months or a year, they become sulfated. So you take them out to dry camp and they last, you know, 8 hours, 12 hours. And you're like, you know, I'm going to have to go to AGMs. That's not the case. You know, the AGMs are less maintenance, and they will last a little longer. Now the difference between the 6 volt and the 12 volt, 6 volt you need 2 batteries. So you're going to have to hook them in series, meaning positive to negative. That gives you a 12 volt bank. So you always have to have 2 batteries. If you want to add more battery power, you have to add 2 more batteries to that as well. The advantage of the 6 volt batteries is that they will give you more cycling time generally. So again, they will last longer over the years if they're conditioned properly than the 12 volts. Again, you can get to amp hour, you know, and you hook them in series, they still only have 100 amp. You have to get 2 more batteries to double that, so you have to have 4. That's a lot more money. I can go with a 12 volt battery and I can add a second 12 volt. Now I have a positive, a 12 volt. There's a lot of education that you can go through in batteries. One of the things on the site about the different camping you're going to do. And that's not something that you had in here, because if you're going to be hooked up to shoreline power a lot of the times and just occasionally dry camping, I think going with AGMs and going with 4.6s and all that stuff, you're spending a lot of money for something you're not using. You know, look at the 12 volt batteries, look at the battery minder or the charge wizard from Progressive. You should be good, but that's something you have to decide how much time you're going to dry camp, and then you can go with batteries.
Paulette asks, there is some fabric that is peeling off the underside of one of our slide outs. The wait to have it fixed is quite some time. Is there something we can do to temporarily work around this until we can get it fixed, or should we just let it sit until we can get it fixed? Thank you very much.
The fabric that you've got underneath it is probably it's just a protective, kind of like a Tyvek, or you know, it's a weatherproofing type of fabric, and you see it used on a lot of underslide rooms, even underbellies of coaches at times too. And I would say that it's probably something that you can take a look at. If you can get the slide room out, get a couple outside jacks that you can lift up. You can buy those floor jacks from any home improvement store that twist up, just so you get your slide room up a little bit to be able to get back on the underside. And you know, take a look at how that's fastened. Normally those are fastened from the outside, you know, just with some trim pieces, but you might be able to get in there temporarily and just, you know, put in some adhesive that allow that to go in. Pop a piece of plywood on the underside of it, put your jacks under that just so it holds it in place with some pressure for, you know, a day or two, and I would think you'd be able to fix it at least temporarily yourself. without looking at the extent of how far it's going out and everything that's happening to it, it's impossible to tell, you know, the extent of repairs that needed. But I would try that. I think you could, you know, and that is one of the problems right now with getting into RV service centers, is that the RV industry is just boom. They're gonna have record shipments again for the third year in a row today, and we have a shortage of RV technicians. When you get 2008 to 2011, the RV industry pretty much shut down. You know, most manufacturers stopped building for a long time. Half the companies went out of business. You know, dealers laid off half or more of their people. People just stopped. And when the RV industry ramps back up, those service technicians, they went somewhere else. You know, and to get them back in to the RV side of it, they're going, well, you know, I'm going to do wind farms. I'm going to do these other technologies now that look a little more stable, and the RV industry could do this. So RVIA is ramping up. They're putting a lot of schools together trying to get technicians in, so hopefully it'll get a little better in the future.
Ramona asked, what is the best way to keep the gray water lines clean, odor-free without damaging tank seals?
Best way is Thetford has a couple products for freshwater conditioning and sanitation. And again, you can go back to the vinegar or the bleach. You know, if you're going to just do a mild sanitation of it, keeping them clean, I would say you put 1 cup of bleach in your freshwater tank and you know, run it through the into the gray water through your kitchen, your shower, and other stuff. You don't want to go real strong concentration, but that'll help clean it out really well. If you don't like bleach, Thetford has a product for the gray water.
William asked, HWH rear room extensions, how to fix room from leaking back out after retracting. Typically comes out at the bottom.
Okay. Well, the HWH is the actual hydraulic system that's going to run that room in and out with, you know, synchronizing rods that go. That typically isn't going to do much for the leak. You know, the sealing of that room is more on the manufacturer side, and you have to find out where that leak is coming from. Not knowing the make, model, and year of the RV and the slide that you have specifically, usually they have a bulb seal on the inside that brings it out. And read it back to say it leaks on retraction.
It says that how to fix room from leaking back out after retracting. Typically comes out at the bottom.
Oh, leak. Okay, so you're I misunderstood. When you said leaking, I thought you meant water. So he's talking about the creep is what we call it. And that's fairly common in the hydraulic systems. You look at units all over the place, you're gonna have a little 2-inch creep at the bottom of that unit, and typically what that is the seal in one of your, either in the motor itself, the hydraulic, it's supposed to come to a point and stop. And with HWH, they have a great program. If you can, Moscow, Iowa, get in touch with them. It's quite a procedure to do it, but it is something that you see. So it's just basically hydraulic fluid that's supposed to stop, keep a little bit of pressure. It's leaking back through, and that's just the seal getting old.
All right. Bob asked, my rear bumper says that I cannot add anything to it for a bike rack. Is there a way to make this bumper stronger so I can mount bracket to it?
You know, it all depends on, again, the make and the model and the year of the RV. Most of the time when they put something like that, they're not talking so much about the bumper itself structure, but the weight you're going to put on the back end of the unit, and especially on the back axles, because you have an axle weight rating. You can always beef up a bumper. You can always get somebody to put some kind of an undercarriage, and rather even put it on the bumper, you should have a stinger on the back side. A stinger is a hitch receiver that you could bring something out and put a rack back there. But probably what's happened is that back end, when you put stuff inside of it, it's probably really close to gross axle weight rating. So what I would recommend is take it to a CAT scale. Go to catscale.com, CATSCALE, catscale.com. For $10, you can find front axle, back axle, different pads, and then go and look at your data plate, and you'll see GVWR, GAWR, front and rear, and find out where's that at, and how much weight do I have on it, and what am I going to put on the backside. You know, bikes don't weigh that much, but people get crazy with them. So if you're okay with the axle weight rating, then I would look at getting a receiver hitch adapter instead of putting it on the bumper.
Stephen asked, how often do you folks bleach the freshwater system?
You know, there isn't really a certain time. It kind of depends on how, first, the water quality that you get. You know, I've done it sometimes 2-3 times a year when I've gotten some really kind of foul tasting water from the campground source, and it all depends on their well and how well you know, they filter it themselves. For many years now, I've been using an inline filter coming into the coach, so I haven't had to do it as often. You know, a lot of times it just basically depends on you know, what the water quality is. The other thing is too is if I forget to dump the freshwater tank, it sits in there for a week or 2 weeks at times, and you know, then I come back out and go, ooh. So anytime you let that hard water sit for a while, it's going to get odors. And so just kind of take a rule of thumb, or not rule of thumb, just on your own experience. What does it smell like? You can do a water purity test too, and I don't have one right here in front of me, but there are a couple companies out there that you can either do the IntelliTech probe that will tell you the water quality, or get the AquaMate water test kit, and it will tell you if you're starting to get some, you know, some stuff in there you don't want. Then you want to flush it.
Okay, Dale asked, intermittent jacks down warning after vehicle has been parked a few days. Jacks do not appear to be down, but pumps runs for perhaps 45 seconds, indicating it is retracting jacks, and then all is well again. Dealer has replaced entire pump, manifold assembly with no change in symptoms. Lippert sent me a pressure switch, the change, and again, it did not eliminate the problem. Now they want a pressure check by dealer, which is backed up until August. Your thoughts or suggestions, please.
They should have done that first. I guess that would be my thought. It sounds like they started swapping parts out beforehand. So somewhere you've got a leak in one of your seals that goes just enough to tell that sensor that, hey, my jacks are down, even though they might not even be down. They just started to go a little bit and hit that sensor. So replacing all those components, you know, was, and that happens a lot. I guess because to pressure test that, it's going to take a while to do it. That's why you're waiting into August. I would get in touch with Lippert right now and tell them that you need to take it into a place that I want to use it this summer. We've gone through all this stuff here. You know, unless that dealer is going to cover this free of charge, but I would start by calling Lippert, and then you know, maybe getting their service manager involved and going back to, you know, that dealer, even get the service manager with Lippert. You know, that's kind of a tough one.
Ron asked, is diesel better than gas if you are going to be putting 90,000 plus on the coach when you buy it? Also, diesels are supposed to be more expensive to fix. Are the costs better because of resale of diesel, the longevity of diesel, and the towing?
Well, there's a lot of factors that go into a choice between a gas and a diesel. You know, the diesel engine, it does cost a little more typically for maintenance and for repairs on it, but usually you don't have to, and you're going to maintain it less. The oil changes are further apart, so that kind of washes out to even. The repairs on them are definitely more expensive than the gas, but you know, by the time you get into repairing a diesel, you're several tens of thousands of miles further down than you were with the gas. So, you know, you don't have to do it as often, and it really comes back boiling down to how well you maintain it and drive it, change the oil, that type of stuff. The advantage of the diesel, in my opinion, is, and if you're going to put 90,000 miles on a unit, you're going to hold much better resale value on the diesel than you will on the gas. Gas, by the time you put 90,000 on that thing, you're going to have a tough time getting resale value out of it, much at all. The advantage of the diesel is more power. You're going to have more torque, so you're going to be able to carry more stuff. You're going to be able to tow more stuff. You're going to be able to handle the wind. And if you're going to put 90,000 miles in it, I'm pretty sure you're going to hit a wide variety of driving characteristics like mountains and hills and winds. And then it depends on the weight of the vehicle too, and how high you go into. You know, my dad had a 35-foot Winnebago Brave that was on a gas, and he went to Alaska and had no problems with it. But if you're going to start towing and putting 4 slides and towing 5,000 pounds and going up hills, that gas is gonna lumber. And I would recommend go out and test drive 2 or 3 of them and see. But you know, my recommendation I think would be diesel if you're going to go 90,000 plus. And if that's the case, you're going to be in it a lot, because 90,000 is going to take a while to get to.
Lee asked, I need assistance on how to open up the black box where the seatbelt retractor is located. I need to get my seatbelt repaired and don't know how to get the black box opened.
That one actually, again, the make, model, and the year of the RV. Typically, there is no black box other than a cover that goes over the mechanism. So you'll have your reel, and I can't think of the name of the actual component that the seatbelt coils up into, but it's a spring-loaded reel with a catch on it that's going to be bolted either to the A-pillar or to the floor of that unit, and then it's a series of just a cover over the top of it. So check to see if it's just a plastic cover, see if you can pop that off. If it's not, if you can get me the make, model, and year of that rig, hopefully we can track it down and just send it in through the Facebook or one of the other social media accounts.
M asked, my weather stripping is coming off around my door. Is there a special glue I should use to glue it back on?
Again, make, model, and year. It all depends. Is it actually glued on, or is it the kind that just slips on and is pinched? Those type of weather stripping pieces would have metal that's incorporated into them, and they actually get pinched with this pneumatic thing that pinches them in there. I'm assuming that if you're looking at an adhesive, it's probably just glued in. So I would recommend that you go to a good auto parts store and ask for weather stripping adhesive. Same type of stuff is used on cars, on the trunks, on the doors, on all different kinds of places. So you should be able to find something that is designed for that. That's what most manufacturers just source out a weather strip product.
Robert asked, do you feel that RV tire covers are effective in preventing sun damage?
Yes. I think if you're going to have an RV sit for any more than a day exposed to the sun, put some kind of cover on it, whether it's a piece of cardboard or anything. Get the sun away from that, because that's going to dry out the petroleum in the sidewall of the tire. It will start to crack and it will weather check, and it won't take long before you have a tire that's got a weak spot. Whether you get the vinyl covers, something that I've been looking at, I actually saw at the show a couple years ago a company that made one that had a remote control, and it came down like a roller that covered the whole wheel well, and I thought that's a little excessive, but you could just find a local upholstery shop that could take a blackout piece of vinyl, put some kind of weight rod on the bottom of it, and then put snaps, and I could snap it right at the floor level, cover that whole thing. It's easier to put on, it's cheap, and it's easy to cover in. So that's something we've been looking at, how we can make one of those for a video here coming up. So, but yes, cover the tires. Long answer short, short answer long.
Daniel asked, what is the best way to inspect brakes?
The best way to inspect brakes is, you basically got to take them off. You got to take the tire off, look at the pads, look at the rotor, and again, make, model, and year. You need to know what you're looking at, but they're fairly generic. Most everybody has disc brakes anymore, so you need to get in and check the thickness of the pad, check the grooves in the rotor, just to see if they're within tolerance and safe. I guess just to follow up a little bit on that, that could be something it depends on how comfortable you are getting into that. If you got a larger rig, you got to get it jacked up. You got to get it, the tire off. There's a lot of safety issues with that. That might be something that I would put to a tire expert.
Steve asked, for some reason I can't seem to get enough pressure for water. Have plenty when on city, but water pump only had small amount of pressure. Help.
Okay, and I want to back up a little bit. I'm glad you asked that question because one of the things on the earlier question we talked about the water pump, here with the pressure in it, is he also said that when he is on city water fill, his freshwater tank fills up. What happens in it's in the service compartment when you hook your outside hose up, and this is not a good example because this. You hook it up to your city water fill, you have a valve that says city or tank fill. And when you go to the tank fill, that will automatically switch over and fill your tank rather than having to take the hose off and fill it through the gravity feed. Well, there are times when that valve does not go all the way over to city or to fill. And so if you're on city water fill and your tank is filling up and overflowing, that valve is not switching completely over and it's allowing some water to go over there because there's no other way for it to get there. So I'd get that valve checked. That's something too that with yours, that if you're having low pressure and it's good on city and it's not so good on here, you either have an air leak coming in because your city water fill is going to come in and bypass this pump completely. So I got a strainer on this side with a filter that could be plugged. I could have an air gap. I could have a unit that's going bad. I could also have low voltage. If I don't have 12.6 volts in my battery, it's down to 10.5. This isn't going to run at 100% efficiency. So I would start by taking out the strainer, fixing that. Maybe even pull this out and bench test it, see what kind of water flow you get out of it. Again, 3 gallons per minute. That's not a lot of water flow out of it. So you might want to upgrade your pump to the SureFlow Whisper Quiet. It's going to run 4.6.
Greg asked, is it worthwhile to add auxiliary fans to the area behind my fridge to move more air to help the fridge run more efficiently? I have seen up to 2 added to the upper vent on the side of the slide out. Just keep hearing it doesn't help that much. I imagine scoping out a good spot for placement is the key.
Yeah, that is, one of the first things you want to do is if you're going to get really hot areas, you want to make sure that you maintain the refrigerator right. You want to, once a year, you should take a little blowout tool like this. I just happen to make this from O'Reilly Auto Parts. It's a blow gun with a 1/4-inch tube and a pinch clamp here. Hook it to a compressor and wear some safety glasses and just go in and blow out the whole back end of the unit. Make sure that the coils are good and cleaned off. And since you got a slide room, you said, make sure that vent is open and clean in there. Make sure there's nothing obstructing that so that that air can get out of there. You'll also be able to clean the burner assembly with this. Place it in an area where the heat of the day, it'll be in the shade. I have seen where some people put a small little awning over that area where the back of the refrigerator is. And the fans do help. The fans don't help if they're just the small little ones going on the bottom of the vent because there's too much stuff in the way. But you get the nice bigger 5 to 7 inch magnetic fans that go right on the evaporator coil up at the top and pull air up and out. They do help. They get to a certain temperature and they turn on automatically. A lot of manufacturers are just putting that in automatically. It isn't even an option anymore. So check to make sure you don't have them first of all, but to put those in, you typically are going to have to pull the refrigerator out. I know there's some people that have talked about a vent fan you can put up in the vent itself, and those I haven't seen much good comments about those.
Bernard asked how to easily get rid of mildew on awning after winter season. Thank you.
Okay, first thing you want to do is start off with Dawn dish soap. Just use the blue Dawn dish soap with a 1/4 cup in a gallon or 1/2 cup. Maybe when you have to do that, that's a little much, but Dawn will clean it up really, really well. And then if it's an A&E product, A&E does have a cleaner treatment. You might want to use a little bit of bleach. And I would use a very, very small amount of bleach or mildew cleaner in that, and then get a conditioner. As A&E does have a conditioner, depending if you have acrylic or a vinyl style awning, and that'll help keep it waterproof.
Okay, Jeff asks, I am having issues with the headlights for the vehicle. When I first start the RV, the high beam indicator light is on. When this happens, the headlights don't work and the side cameras don't turn on when the turn signal is turned on. After the RV is running for a few minutes, then the high beam indicator goes out and the headlights work. Recently I was using the RV and the headlights were working. When I went to put the high beams on, the headlights stopped working. Some of the fuses and the headlights started to work again until a few minutes down the road I went to use the horn. The headlights stopped working again. I pulled over again and waited about 15 minutes, then started the RV and the lights started to work normally again. What would you advise me to start troubleshooting the issue? I have called many dealerships in the area and Ford dealerships and have not been. Like when the RV is first started, I pulled over and played with able to find any place that would look at the issue.
First of all, I would quit using my high beams and my horn. I think that's, I'm sorry, it's like, it hurts when I do this. Don't do that. Okay. That is a very, very difficult troubleshooting item to find. We call them gremlins. When they don't do it all the time, you have to try and recreate when it happens. It sounds like a heat issue. It sounds like at some point where you put on the high beams, whether you've got loose contact points in your high beam sensor or your turn signals, or there's so many electrical components in that. And one of the things we didn't get a make, model, or year of the vehicle. And this is very important for anybody that's watching. Anytime you contact a dealer, you contact anybody for some service work, make, model, and year, just so they can hopefully whittle it down. Somewhere you're going to have to get in and get somebody. If you stop the unit and let it set for a while, to me that's a heat issue. Something is getting hot in that unit. A relay. I don't recommend going in and just replacing parts by any means, but there are, if you can get in there when it's not working and check your fuse blocks, you should have a chassis fuse block with not only fuses in there, but relays that are the black little boxes. Does anything feel warm in those? Just take an IR gun too and just see what do I see? Maybe start off when it's not running and it's cold and just hit that across the block and see what's the temperature. And then if you can recreate the situation, or even when you're running it, see what that temperature reads in various different places. And then if it does happen again, go back in and find out where, do I see a temperature change anywhere? And that may help isolate where it's at. And that block can be just about anywhere. I know a lot of the Monacos, the National RVs, some of the diesel pushers will put it in the lower front corner of the by the driver's side in a compartment. Some of them will be on the actual firewall in the front. So there are quite a few different places. But if you can find the make, model, and year, and then kind of narrow it down, it also and I'm not positive it's a chassis related issue, because it could be a Freightliner chassis, or he didn't say whether it was gas or diesel, I don't think, but so if it's even with a chassis like that, sometimes the manufacturers supply the headlights and all of them do the headlights, but some of them do the actual dash cluster and those components. So you have to identify who is doing what, and again, that's a tough one to do from here.
Okay, last question for tonight.
Okay.
Jim asks, Dave, the left front and left back hydraulic jacks on my Class A RV don't fully retract when I press the store button. They move up an inch or so, then I need to use a pry bar to help them up. Is there some maintenance I need to perform other than washing the piston with my warm soapy water as the manual states?
Okay, then either it's a HWH system or Lippert system. I think they both recommend the soapy water. You might want to have your springs checked. And again, if I don't know the style, if the HWH used a spring action to bring those up. I think Lippert even does too on their models now. It might be the spring has gotten weak. And a lot of times what that is the seal at the top of the piston. And if you can give me the make and model of year of that, we can go to Lippert, LCI1.com, HWH.com. Both of them have in their troubleshooting guides, that same situation where you've got to go in, pry it up from underneath. More than likely, it's a seal. So that's it. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out. We had some good questions. We had some tough questions, and that's one of the things you're going to find with the RV industry, kind of like the automobile industry, is there's there's such a diverse amount of product and way manufacturers do it and stuff. I wish I could automatically say, boom, this is it. But a lot of times it takes a lot more research. I've been in this business since 1983, and every day I get a question, I go, wow, I didn't know that, and I'm going to have to research it. So we'll keep researching, keep asking questions. Summer's here finally, and get out and enjoy the weather. We've had rain for the last 2 days, so hopefully, or Saturday, Sunday, I guess it was. So hopefully everybody has a great week coming up and a great weekend, and have a wonderful summer, and get out and enjoy your RV. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month. And I'm supposed to be doing something, so it doesn't look like I'm sitting going. So I'm doing something here. Yeah. Check my temperature.